welcome back. And of course, as was mentioned earlier in the show, the focus of this conversation is looking at human and jaguar wildlife conflict in Belize. What exactly does that mean? Well, we have quite a panel here to be able to share lots of information on this issue. We're joined by Yahira Orbina of the Environmental Institute at the University of Belize. We're joined by Edgar Correa, Jaguar Officer at the Forest Department, and Dr. Rebecca Foster of Belize Panthera Jaguar Program, the Director. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning.
Morning.
Now, Edgar, you were the first person I addressed on the panel because you've quite recently been in the media looking at a specific issue of jaguar and human interaction and some of the challenges that take place there. So let's just start off with an update as to the problem with the jaguars and the livestock in Crooked Tree.
Well, like mentioned before, the cameras are still up, taking picture, monitoring the area to see exactly what's around, how many jaguars are around. These cameras could last up to a month, 2 weeks, 2 months, depends on how the intensity of the reports are on the situation. So right now, at the moment, they're still monitoring and taking pictures.
Okay. Now, I want to ask your reaction to when a story like that is aired, when you have a community coming out and saying, listen, we're tired of the jaguars because they keep on cutting into our, essentially, that's how they make their living, coming in and killing their cattle and robbing them of money. And it becomes a very tense situation because people start saying, well, you can't shoot them because of environmental issues, but they're also cutting into your profit. So this is really one of the areas where I would imagine that you continuously have to do education.
Yeah, education awareness is very important. Communities, farmers especially, what we work with, come out and do extend this type of reaction when it comes to these problems. But most of the time, farmers would report things really late, meaning report things 2 weeks after, a week after. They would try to take things in their own hands before actually reporting to the department. So that actually delays us in actually doing something or knowing where these hotspots are in Belize to actually move along with advising them on what to do.
Is that one thing that you would want to make clear, that perhaps at the first instance, the farmer can contact the forestry department, Panthera, whoever they have access to, and let you know?
Yes, that is important for the farmers or the communities or NGOs or whoever is getting this information firsthand to report it immediately to the forest department. So we can actually move towards it. Noting that I'm the only one at the forest department that does this in Belize. But nevertheless, we have partners around the country we work with that can actually assist us to move faster. But that's really important for them to report it immediately.
How widespread are these types of conflict? And
widespread meaning it's all around Belize. We have different scenarios in the southern part of the country, in the northern part of the country, in central Belize. Our main focus is central, but we work along all Belize. So whatever report comes along, we deal with it depending on the intensity of the report and how immediate it's reported. Sometimes it doesn't make sense for me to move away to Corozal district or Tolia district if they don't have nothing in place for me to gather. I can advise them through the phone. I can tell them the same advice I would do if I'm out there. But actually to go out there and collect proper evidence for us to do proper decision making, it takes some time for them to report it immediately so we can actually move towards whatever we need to do.
One of the questions I had in terms of discovering new places where jaguars are becoming a threat to livestock is, I know we have our tracking programs that was instituted with Panthera a while back. So in terms of where this type of activity is located, is it outside of the said corridor that is established? Is it showcasing perhaps new areas where the jaguars are moving, or this is all known information?
Well, jaguars are quite common throughout all of Belize, and Belize has a lot of forest cover. 60% of Belize is forest, so pretty much every small village or farm is quite close to forest. There's a forest boundary, which means that there's always going to be some contact zone between people and wildlife. And so the work that we're doing and the work that Edgar's doing means that if people report in when they have conflict, we can start building up a picture of where there might be hotspots across the country, start focusing in on those areas and helping people to try and find ways to improve their livestock management to reduce the rates of problems.
And the tracking system is still going?
Well, we monitor cats using camera traps, both inside and outside of protected areas. So we're able to learn a bit about the ecology of these cats and their relationship with other competitors, like pumas, for example, and their prey species, by putting up these cameras within the protected areas where the abundance of jaguars is higher. But outside the protected areas, we can also put up these cameras to really see, well, how many cats are there wandering around the agricultural landscape. That's something that Jaguar is working on with the Environmental Research Institute. So that's the main method by which we study these cats. Recently we did deploy GPS collars on some cats as well, so we can actually see how far they're ranging. The more we learn about that, we can see where they're going, how often they leave protected areas, etc.
Now, the challenge obviously is that as communities develop, they're moving into these areas. And it also with agriculture as well. If you expand your farm, then you're moving closer and closer into the habitats of the jaguars. Is there anything that people can do to be able, from the initial setup, to be able to prevent any kind of conflict from taking place?
There's a number of different strategies that can be employed. I don't know if this will pick up on the camera or not, but we have a brochure here which indicates a list of different suggestions. I don't know if you can have that on the screen or not.
Yeah, they're going to get it. Go ahead.
Okay, great. You know, and this ranges from the type of fencing that you use, whether the cattle or the livestock go out to get water from forested streams, or whether they have a water trough within the pasture. You know, jaguars love water, and creeks through natural forest, it's a great travel path for jaguars. So if the cattle go there, there's a risk of being ambushed. If you can make sure that they drink in the safety of the pasture, it's better. You know, bringing young vulnerable animals closer to the house. Maybe you have electric lighting at night time. If you have electricity there, you can use solar powered lights. If not, we're testing out various things to do with that.
Because the calves are trapped, they're more at risk.
The calves, yes, definitely. The smaller the animal, the easier it is for the jaguar to catch, definitely. Other strategies would include proper disposal of waste carcasses, so that you don't attract wild cats in who then become habituated to a regular source of free meat. The use of guard animals is also something that we're investigating. So having other animals in the herd that actually scare off the jaguar, in particular.
What animal will scare off a jaguar?
Well, good question. There are two different species that are being used in different parts of the continent. So in South America, water buffalo are being used, and they're very defensive species, and will actually form a circle around their young animals when a predator comes near. So it's quite good to integrate those into a herd. That might be more difficult to do in Belize. I know a few farmers do have water buffalo here, but there is a tendency, if they're not managed properly, that they can get feral. So one of the things that we've been looking at here, and we've been learning from farmers themselves about the use of guard donkeys.
Donkeys will keep jaguars away.
So there are a number of farmers already using donkeys in Belize, and one of the things that we're now doing is working with specific farmers to monitor, does this really work? And that's something that Jaguar is...
Please do tell us, how does this work?
Well, like Rebecca was saying, we are working with farmers to identify what works, what will help predation and reduce predation. And one of the things is donkeys, and we have a special donkey named Napoleon, as you can see.
Napoleon? All right.
Yes. But these series of pictures will show that this donkey was among the cattle.
Yeah.
And then we will have a picture of a jag within the same area. And we have this close communication with each farmer we work with. And he reported no losses then. It's an initial result So what we want to see is actually, if we're testing, if it's going to help reduce predation. So in our program, we basically just try to monitor and establish some of these management strategies just to ensure that for us to identify what works. We don't want to recommend things that, you know, will not reduce the predation, and if some farmers will do some investment, we wanted to identify the strategy that would reduce.
Is Napoleon the only donkey being used in a farm
At
currently?
the moment, we have this particular farm we are using, but most of our things, like Rebecca said, we are learning from farmers. And so a lot of the Mennonite communities use donkeys within their pasture, and they have suggested and said that they have seen a reduction in predation because of keeping donkeys within their farms. So that's how we started moving forward in actually testing and monitoring if donkeys would reduce predation.
The Mennonite communities, they use it a lot. They have been trying to advise people to use donkeys more.
But how does it work? Do they make, I mean, you say the buffaloes are aggressive, so what, the donkeys make noise and chase
the
them
donkeys,
away?
they make a loud burr, and they are like an alarm, basically. Usually cattle will be eating and feeding around without noticing what's happening around, but donkeys are naturally, you know, sensitive to different changes, noises, or scent. So they would notice something around, and then I would make the loud noise and alert the herd to make it protect their small calves better. So they're like an alarm system.
They're a natural alarm.
Yeah.
Now, what has been, you mentioned earlier, Edgar, about using cameras, for example. What's the purpose, and is there a policy that you're trying to develop on how to advise people to actually deal with these conflicts?
Well, it's not a policy. Right now we're in process of developing a protocol within the department to guide us in steps on what to do when a report comes in. Like I said before, in the intensity of the report, what will be our next step we'll take. And
so the cameras are really there to see exactly how many cats are in the area, but you have a window basically that you have to monitor?
Well, the cameras, what we do is to, within each farm we're working, we monitor what is there. We want to know it was within the landscape, because now what is unique here in Belize, like Rebecca said, is that we have a big chunk that has forest, and the contact zone between wildlife and humans is quite high. And within these farms, you could see there's a clear pasture, and then you would have forested areas right beside it. So with the cameras, we're monitoring what's there, prey species, the cats, what type of predators. In some farms, actually, we have identified another predator, which is the coyote. And a coyote is a species that indicates degradation, which is also that is occurring here in Belize. There's a lot of clearing happening. So these species normally are not found in forested areas. But what makes... Yes?
They get moved out of their habitat, and that's why
they are species like an indicator species of land degradation. So, but also with the cameras, we could identify jaguars. Jaguars, their patterns are like our fingerprints. Each individual has a different pattern. So with the cameras, we could identify the number of individuals within the area, and that's one of the main targets for the camera survey, is for us to understand what's in the landscape, how many predators are there, if there is prey species, because we have to consider as well, sometimes these animals come into contact zones because there might be a lack of prey species. And within the farms, some of these farms within the management area, they are a bit overgrown, so the JAG cannot distinguish between a forested area or not. And if a cattle is roaming around an area, like a forested area, a cat might confuse it. It's just meat for him or her. He would just prance on it.
Now, what are the numbers looking like in terms of countrywide animals, livestock lost to predation? Is it a serious amount of animals being lost on an annual basis?
It varies between different farms. Every farm is unique. It has a unique landscape and variable management strategies. we conducted some surveys in the rural Belize district area, asking people about their management and how many losses they've had. And some farms, for whatever reason, have no losses. Other farms can have anything from 2%, 60% of their stock in a given year. And that can have a considerable impact on the small-scale farmer. It can be a real problem, and you can understand why they may get frustrated, and they're generally remarkably tolerant people. I'm very impressed at how tolerant Belizeans are. A lot of other countries, the predator comes out and the shotguns come out, So it's quite remarkable. In terms of knowing how many losses there are that are actually as a result of jaguars, that's more difficult, because often people's livestock will go missing with no explanation or no real evidence. Often Edgar gets called out and the farmer reports, my calf is missing, but there's no evidence for him to investigate to say, well, it was a jaguar, as opposed to a cattle rustler, a snake bite, a puma, a coyote, any number of other things that could have caused that animal to die or go missing. And so, again, that's...
So there are no telltale ways of knowing that it's a jaguar that took your livestock versus anything else?
There are, if you can get to the scene quickly and investigate.
Okay.
So you can see from that picture of the jaguar, they've got really big heads, really huge skulls, strong muscles. That means the way they kill their prey is by crushing the back of the neck or the head. So if you have a dead cow with holes in its head, it's a jaguar.
Okay.
But the other predators kill in different ways. But in order to assess that, you need to be there on the scene to be able to look at the carcass, find the carcass, and figure out what actually killed the animal.
Now, when you talk about the forestry department actually partnering with both organizations, with UBs, ERI, and Panthera, what is the hope in terms of the relationship that you all have?
Well, we work together very closely. I think Panthera's role in Belize here, what we're trying to achieve is to really build capacity for Belizeans to study and protect their own natural resources and wildlife. And, we're doing that by teaching at the University of Belize wildlife management, which is helping young Belizeans become conservation professionals, such as Jaguar and Edgar here. By working with the forestry department, they're the governing body when it comes to wildlife, so we would like to work directly with them because they're responsible for the wildlife of Belize. And by working together with the university, we're also able to develop applied research strategies and plans. So the kind of research that Jaguar is doing, and we work along with her to try and really answer questions and find solutions to these conflict issues.
Now, we had started with some of the advice to farmers on how to protect their livestock. Is there anything that we missed? Because we got stuck with the donkey for a second.
I'm just looking at our list there. Yeah. There are a few other things. I think Jaguar touched on the availability of wild prey.
Okay.
So if an area is really depleted of the natural wild animals that a cat would hunt, like the collared peccaries, the white-lipped peccaries, the armadillos, the gibnut, and there's a higher abundance of domestic animals or livestock than there is wild prey, then chances are it's going to hunt what's more common and easier to catch, which would be the livestock. So promoting wild prey on and around your farm is a positive thing to do.
So you want to provide alternatives to the predators.
Exactly. The attacking livestock, that can be exacerbated if the cat is injured in some way, because the livestock is easier to catch than a wari, for example. If the cat is maybe got his canines are damaged or he's been blinded, that can happen if people take pot shots at these cats and damage them with gunshot. Then they're more likely to prey on the really easy animals, maybe the dogs around a village or something.
Yeah.
So refraining from just taking random shots at cats is also wise, so that you don't injure them and make the problem worse. Yeah.
Is that a good indicator for you when you get a report that perhaps a predator that people assume is a jaguar is going after the village dogs, as you mentioned, that it's most likely a problem or damaged cat?
That does happen.
Yes, I think we had some images to show what can happen to the canines of these cats when they get shot in the face. They lose their canines, they cannot hunt properly anymore.
So they need an easy target.
They need an easy target. I remember a few years back there was a cat that cleared out a lot of dogs from a village down south, and they did shoot the cat, and the dog that was in his mouth when he was shot survived. There's not many dogs that survive a jaguar cat attack. It was because he had no canines anymore, and he had survived the last year or so by squashing dogs rather than biting dogs. You know, he had really no good teeth at all. So.
And there's also the program at the zoo that ties in with the problem jaguars that you are able to capture.
Yes, the zoo is a great asset to Belize. They do some fantastic environmental awareness, teaching people about the cats and their role in the ecosystems of Belize. The cats that they have there are great for people to come and see, so people who haven't seen a jaguar for themselves can come to the zoo and see one of the cats and be amazed by their beauty. Yeah.
I wanted to go back to something because I wanted to get a sense of, I was doing some reading, and you had a Brechin report that goes back to 2004 that gave you some numbers. But where are we today? Have we seen an increase in predation on livestock, or has it reduced? And the introduction of these, whether it's donkeys, the buffaloes, is it a significant change that you have people convinced, farmers convinced?
It's a really good question, and the only way we can find out if attacks are increasing, if these strategies are working, is if people report what's happening and we can monitor it. Edgar's been working as the Jaguar officer for about 2 years now, and over the first 16 months he had 70 reports come in, so that's about one a week.
All at different farms?
Some of them
similar areas.
Yeah, similar areas, but most of them are different farms.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's a lot of work for one guy. But you know, we need to keep monitoring this, and we need people to tell us what's going on. If people don't report in, we don't know if it's going up or going down. So again, we emphasize that.
So we haven't had a compilation of attacks since 2004.
So the work that was done in 2004, Brechin and Buff toured around the districts and kind of asked, sort of within villages, have you had an attack or no? You know, people's memory can sometimes be fuzzy, so they just recorded whatever people could tell them had happened historically. What Edgar is doing is monitoring in real time, and only now we can start seeing patterns. The nice thing is, over a few years we'll start seeing if this is a seasonal occurrence. I think you tend to start getting more reports at this time of year when it's getting drier. Well, it's supposed to be getting drier. But you know, we've only had a year or so and a half of being able to see that.
So that was based more on anecdotes, what people remembered. But now you have your camera set up to verify that there is a jaguar in the area. Now, what happens? Let's go back to our very same example that's really brought this issue to light. What happens if you do detect a jaguar in that area?
Well, if we do detect a jaguar in that area, we would really have to see exactly how much jaguars are there, because sometimes you would detect more than one.
Okay. So you want to see if there's jaguars and how many jaguars.
Yeah, and then also it has to correlate with the attacks. What happened? Where did the attack happen? What type of management they had in place before the attack happened? So what we'll do is try to advise them in terms of how you can prevent this from happening.
Okay.
Try to advise them in terms of, okay, well, the fencing wasn't too proper, or the buffer zone wasn't proper. most of the time, farmers what they do is bringing their livestock closer to home. Sometimes they don't check them every day. Checking them regularly, corralling small calves at night will reduce that. The jaguar doesn't find anything around, it will move along.
What is the response by the farmers because I thought that you would have captured this jaguar because it's preying on people's livestock. But what you're saying is it's almost in defense of the jaguar. Was it the jaguar that caused the loss of livestock? And you're verifying the attacks that they're bringing forward. So when you go back to the farmers and you tell them, okay, we won't necessarily remove your threat, we will lessen your possibility for threat. How do they respond to that?
Well, at the beginning, they would actually respond like how any other farmer would respond.
I just want you to get rid of it. Yeah. That's what I assume. Yeah.
Do you have everything in place? Do you have a dog? There are traps in place? What? No, it's not. It's not that way. How it goes. We have to take steps before actually making a proper decision.
Okay.
And that first step would be to see what's actually around.
Okay.
After that, then we could advise them, and if they're implementing different management in place, and still problem is occurring, then we can make our decisions on what to do.
So your first response is not to capture it?
No.
Okay.
But
it's key for people to know that.
But also what we need to consider with the cameras when it comes, like Edgar said, they might have more than one individual. So in order for us to get to that solution of removing, we need to really verify which individual it is. Because there have been cases within a farm, you might have identified 5 jaguars. And it doesn't mean that all 5 of them are conflict jaguars. Maybe one is just passing by. And I think still examples from Dr. Foster's research, you've seen that 5 jaguars were caught in a camera trap within a farm, and the farmer just went on killing each jaguar, and until the 5th one, that was the actual problem jaguar. So that's what we need to be careful. We just don't want to be removing every predator within the area, and it would be good for us to just try and monitoring and establishing some management strategies, because also these management strategies will help the productivity of the farms. So by improving their management strategy, they're actually increasing eventually in the longer term their economic benefits within their cattle.
Now, we've seen certain things like the wildlife corridor. That was something that really galvanized people as to the presence of the jaguar throughout Belize. But we don't always get a sense of how the numbers of jaguars that we have in the country. We often think that you don't see it, it doesn't exist, or, you know, is that necessarily the case?
It's a lot of people ask how many jaguars are there in Belize, and it's a very difficult question to answer. The numbers of jaguars across Belize differ in different areas. So just like in Belize City, there's a very high number of people per square mile compared to rural Belize, where there's a few number of people per square mile. In different parts of Belize, there are areas where there are lots of jaguars and areas where there are fewer. So Coxcomb Basin Wildlife Sanctuary it's world famous for having one of the highest densities of jaguars in the region. Other areas in Belize, there are fewer. And so extrapolating that up to figure out what is there nationally is quite difficult. And of course, jaguars don't respect international boundaries either. So you can't sort of put a fence around Belize and say there are this many just in Belize.
They're not just Belizean jaguars.
No, they're Central American.
Exactly. But given the sites where we have sampled, we've had camera traps out in a few sites across Belize, you know, we could say there could be anything from 300 to maybe 1,400 jaguars in Belize. So it's very wide confidence.
Very wide range, yes.
The more sites that we can sample, the more we can refine that estimate and make it more precise, and the more we can find out about how far these cats range will also help us refine those estimates. So it's ongoing.
Even at your largest estimate, 1,400 is still a very small number, which really underscores, and I think it's the reason we keep asking the question. If we can say, like with the manatees, we have a population of about 1,000, and people can conceptualize how little that number is for the world, or even, for our area, then we can understand the reason why protection is so important. And so 1,400, or even worse, at your smallest estimate is at 300, it really shows that killing 5 jaguars is making a
Huge
devastating
thing, yeah.
impact on the population.
Absolutely.
The reason why I was asking that question, because you kind of spoke about how far they range. Because when you're talking about using the camera, I'm trying to put all of it in perspective for myself. Really looking at what's happening in Crooked Tree and how far that jaguar actually goes, or where he or she is coming from, and to get an idea. Because for some people, just putting up a camera there might be like, why put up a camera? We know there's an issue there, but you don't know how far they range. So that's an important consideration. Am I right in assuming?
Absolutely, and so Yahaira currently has cameras throughout rural Belize in different areas, and she's able to see the same cat popping up on different farms or in different locations outside of farms, and thereby sort of figure out roughly where that cat's moving. Obviously, GPS collars on cats would tell us a lot more, but working with what we have, the cameras are incredibly useful, especially since you get information on everything that passes the camera, all the different cats. Rather than if you just put out collars, you just get the information on 1 or 2 cats.
Yeah.
Now, one of the slides that we had there before we wrap, you had the, I can't remember, the Jagarundi and so many
The
other
different types, yeah.
types.
Yeah.
So the numbers for those are also being tracked?
Well, for these cats, some of them, the ones that we could identify would be like with the patterns. It makes it more difficult for pumas for us to identify because we don't have a pattern, and jaguarundis as well. So what we could have is just a presence absence of these cats. You know, we did detect a cat within this area. We did detect pumas. We did detect jaguarundis. But for the jags and also as we could go more in detail and say, well, we detected these amount of individuals. So for some of them, we could just say we had detection, while the others we say we have these numbers of individuals detected within our area.
And I ask that question because of one thing. Very often, people are more concerned about the jaguars, but should we be concerned about all 5 of the cats that you have in terms of how they impact wildlife, livestock?
Well, the smaller cats, ocelot, jaguarundi, they have been known to cause problems with domestic fowl, so chickens, ducks, whatever. The pumas are actually relatively rare in the agricultural landscapes of Belize. We're detecting them very rarely on our cameras, although they do pop up occasionally. But it's the 2 bigger cats, the jaguar and the pumas, that are able to kill calves and sheep and so on. And as Yahaira mentioned as well, we're now seeing coyotes increasingly moving into Belize from the west. And coyotes are known to kill sheep, and they are already starting to cause problems as well. So we need to bear that in mind, that conflict could start increasing, not because of jaguars, but because of coyotes also.
Okay, and then we'll have to have you back and talk about how do you protect yourself. What animal do you use as a natural alarm for coyotes? All right, well, thank you all. Is there anything else you'd like people to know? I know one of the pushes is that people need to make a report before they decide to shoot whatever is threatening their livestock or try to shoot. They need to make that report. Where do they call?
They should call the forest department immediately, not meaning a week after, a month after. Immediately when you find their carcass, report to the forest department, and we'll definitely do
even if just a suspicion, if they're not sure.
Well, if they do find something in place, it's better yet.
Yeah.
But we can also, if they have an immediate report missing something and we're around the area, we'll go in and do a site visit as well.
All right. Well, thank you all for joining us this morning. And where can people get this information? Do you have it online?
Brochures,
Yeah.
usually when we have it in the forest department.
Okay.
But usually when I go out and do a site visit,
You'll
these
take
are
it
the same things I would go over with the farmers
Okay.
to advise them how to identify different predators, what measures to take, and that's where we usually hand out our awareness. But you can always get it at the forest department. We have it there.
All right.
Well, thanks once again for joining us this morning.
We're going to go ahead and take our final break, and when we come back, we'll have all wrap up, so stay tuned.